how should we manage the money from oil, gas, or mining so it encourages development, gets back to the people, and raises standards of living? One hybrid approach that's received a lot of interest is called the Alaska model, which began in the 1970s in the U.S. There are two parts to the Alaska model that people are usually most interested in: the land deal between the indigenous people and the U.S. government, and how the oil revenues are managed through the Alaska Permanent Fund. Alaska is the largest state in the U.S. It's in the far north next to Canada. It was sold to the U.S. by Russia in 1867 and became a state in 1959. The state had only a few 100,000 people, mostly living in a few small cities. The Alaska model came about because of the discovery of a large oil field in 1968 at Prudhoe Bay on the north slope of the state. Many people, both in and outside the state, saw the promise of economic opportunity in Alaska. But there were also around 51,000 Aboriginal natives in Alaska at the time, and this attitude alarmed them. Their ancestors had been there for thousands of years, but they were among the poorest groups in America. American history has not been kind to Native Americans in general. However, there is one important difference in Alaska. With other Native American tribes, the U.S. Congress has made formal treaties. These were often done to end conflicts, but they limited the natives' lands and rights. There were no treaties in Alaska because the Alaskan natives had never been conquered in conflict. What's more, the wording of the 1959 Alaska Statehood Act implied that the natives had a strong claim to hundreds of millions of acres of land, although some parts also gave land rights to the state. This confusion was slowing down the development of the oil field, exactly at a time when the U.S. was desperately searching for new energy sources. So there was great incentive to try to resolve the native claims. In addition, because of the extreme cold and ice, there was no way to ship the oil by sea from where it was. The oil would require an 800-mile-long pipeline to get it to open harbor, across the land claimed by Native Alaskans. By the late 1960s, Alaskan Native groups had become politically organized. Their claims had strong legitimacy and legality and were well known to the general public. They had spent a lot of time and effort to build consensus and alliances through lots of outreach with other stakeholders. Some of their allies had moral reasons to support them, and some, like the oil companies, more practical reasons. Together, they applied pressure on the federal government to resolve the issue. Although there were some disagreements about terms and limitations, the Native Claims Settlement Act was signed into federal law in 1971. The settlement gave Native Alaskans almost $1 billion and 44 million acres of land, about a ninth of the total land of Alaska, and they were allowed to choose the land they wanted. Now, even in the 1970s, everyone realized that the money needed to be sustainable to create other industries and businesses in Alaska that would benefit the Native Alaskans and improve their lives. There was concern that just handing individuals a large one-time paycheck wouldn't accomplish this because it could lead to waste and unsustainable spending. So the Act set up 13 regional Native corporations, including one for Alaskan Natives no longer living in the state, and 220 local village corporations. Each Alaskan who was at least 1/4 Native received 100 shares of the corporation. These shares cannot be held by anybody but a Native Alaskan and cannot be sold or traded, but they can be passed down through the generations. So Native Alaskans are shareholders in a corporation, benefiting from and having input in how the corporations are run. These corporations are charged with the specific goal of making more money from the money received from the agreement. The surface rights were given to the village corporations, the mineral rights to regional corporations. The regional corporations and some larger village corporations are so large that they are required to file annual financial reports with the state. The native corporations invested in mining and tourism and forestry. They also contributed to scholarships and cultural preservation. But even with all the preparation, development proved to be more of a challenge than was expected. Some of the corporations were extremely successful. Others lacked business experience, or their funds were mismanaged. Some were located in particularly isolated and harsh areas, making development even more difficult. Many millions of dollars were lost early on, but fortunately, other native corporations chose to help them since native culture includes the practice of wealth sharing between tribes. So, are such corporations a solution? It's unclear. The corporations have had special treatment from the U.S. Congress. Native incomes and social indicators such as health and education have improved. But a significant percentage of natives still live below the poverty line. Many times, outside contractors with greater professional skills who have come into Alaska have profited more. The Alaska Permanent Fund works basically as a sovereign wealth fund. It was set up by the Alaskan legislature to set aside at least 25% of the money received by the state from the oil for future generations. It was also designed to keep money out of politics. It does not spend to develop infrastructure or social programs. It can only be used for investing to produce further revenue. It can only spend realized earnings. As of early 2014, the fund was worth $50 billion. To deal with the short-term oil revenue variability, it uses a reserve made up of back taxes and other revenue owed to the state. Any withdrawal requires the approval of the legislature and has to be repaid. One of the most popular aspects of the permanent fund has been the cash dividend paid to each permanent citizen who has lived in the state for the whole calendar year. All Alaskans get the same amount, usually around $1,000, although it depends on the global price of oil. It has a strong impact on the economy and is an important part of many Alaskans' incomes, especially in rural areas. It's administered by the Department of Revenue and uses a complicated calculation based in part on a 5-year average of the fund's performance and other factors. Unsurprisingly, the cash payout has been widely supported by the public. However, recent developments, such as falling oil prices, indicate that the fund will not be sustainable after the oil runs out.